Well, good evening. Hello. Welcome to Arizona Psychedelic Society and the Phoenix Psychedelic Society. My name is Andrea Twitchell, and I'm one of the 4 co-organizers for our 2 meetup groups. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you all for coming tonight. And what I wanted to do was just take just a real couple brief moments to briefly introduce Ron Interpreter, our speaker this evening, and just to give you a little bit of our structure tonight. We will open with prayer, and then I will have Ron introduce himself and his work and what he's offering the community and his medicine, and then I actually have some questions that I've been formulating. Ron and I have been working together in a various kind of capacity here in the community, running into each other, I think, at various events. I met Ron a couple years ago at one of his events.
Yeah.
And actually, as most people know him as Uncle Ron. So Uncle Ron's been around for a while, and I'm here to pick his brain a little bit and then offer the audience an opportunity to ask any of your questions for Ron and his work and offerings to the community. And then we'll close with prayer again. So I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of structure, take our time to get grounded, present, and centered. Let's see. So, Ron Interpreter is an entrepreneur, a philanthropist. He's also a 200-hour yoga teacher practitioner. And as I mentioned earlier, he's known in the medicine community as Uncle Ron. Ron is also a member of the Navajo Nation with relations to San Carlos, the Apache, and the Yaqui. And he's been fulfilling his entrepreneurial interests for the past 22 years. Ron has owned and operated his consulting firm, Interpretive Solutions LLC, which specializes in architecture, film, entertainment, tribal enterprise, and integrative wellness. So if you all will just take a moment to honor Ron and his time and his wisdom this evening, and opening with ceremony and prayer. Thank you.
All right, let's get our mind, our heart, and our emotions aligned. So let's take 2 deep breaths. However you hold space in your traditions, in your teachings, if you do have them, feel free to do that. We're just going to take a couple minutes just to open this opportunity together as a collective. So let's take 2 deep breaths, inhale and exhale, and that second breath, just come to a natural breathing cycle. Wajodo le at the end of that, don't authenticate. Ha aten, shada aten, aten to no kos. Yadet kishat the end of that, shema astan baka, nes ayat eto, donis wajodo le at the end of that, don't authenticate. Spiritual deities in all 4 directions, Father Sky and Mother Earth, in this place of sanctuary, aligning our hearts with our minds, our spiritual body with our human body. Finding gratitude in this experience, finding gratitude in all the resources that brought us to this moment in time. Finding gratitude that our ancestors prayed us into existence, finding gratitude that we have the privilege to pray the next generation into existence. Kut alban saskies to kut alshich ayat eto doshich kujonolet in the net of finiki. Kujona hastli, Kujona hastli, Kujona hastli, Kujona hastli. To the sky I call you Father, to the earth I call you Mother, to all life in between I call you brother and sister. Everyone take 1 deep breath, inhale and exhale. Brothers and sisters, repeat after me, beauty before me. Beauty behind me, beauty above and below me. It has become beautiful again. 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 We are beautiful again. We are beautiful again. Aho, all my relations. Namaste, and so it is. Namaste, so it is. Beautiful. Yeah.
So Ron, please tell us more about yourself, your work, what you're up to these days. I'm a little more curious. Yeah, you're a little mover and shaker, and you do a lot of traveling, especially I see your offerings throughout the Southwest and even all the way up in Hawaii. So
Yeah.
I'd like to hear a little bit more of the church that you've recently formed. And your offerings and what you've been kind of experiencing really from an indigenous way and the bridging of Western healing modalities and indigenous practices of healing. So those are the things that I'm curious about hearing more of.
Absolutely. A little bit about my background. I got my degree in architecture and organizational development. Bear Down, Arizona, Wildcats. I know I'm in a different territory, but shout out to the Wildcats. As an entrepreneur, I've been working with tribal enterprises, film and entertainment. I help produce films, and I'm also in the architectural development field. I ran an architecture firm for a few years, and what's really captivated my attention in this moment in time is integrative wellness. And I have clients who are naturopathic doctors, people who are leaving the industry in terms of medical field and going into and venturing on their own. So helping them set up those businesses, those protocols. I also, as a wellness coach, I also teach and train in the substance abuse recovery centers. There's 3 that I operate out. There's 2 here in the Valley, and there's 1 in Sedona that I work with. So that's my entrepreneurial spirits. Entrepreneur gives me the opportunity to be looking for solutions. And in our Navajo traditions and philosophy, that's one of the main things about living life is to find solutions, to be in a place of solutions. And so everything associated with our physical well-being, our mental, emotional, everything associated is our spiritual practice to find solutions. And so in Navajo traditions, they call it ehozin. The philosophy and the principle is called ehozin. When you translate that into English, it means to know yourself. Simply just to know yourself. And how we get to know ourselves is really up to us. We have a willingness, we have free will to choose how we get to understand who we are. And the other thing about ehozin is when you take it a little bit deeper, take that in a deeper sense of what we really mean by that is it's between you and God. Meaning that whatever you do has a direct relation in how it will impact the universe, and it's between you and God or Christ consciousness or the one source. However you have that relationship with the universe, it's really up to you and that, which allows you to then be showing up authentically, constantly in your thoughts, your words, and just being in that space physically. Because whatever you're going to be doing is going to be impacting the universe. You are the result of what's going to come back to you. So you got to be thinking in the moment and in the time of what's going out there. And then in many traditions, they call it manifesting. The context of manifestation in many traditions, especially in European countries and European thought, is I'm going to think of something, and then I'm going to do things to manifest. In Navajo tradition philosophy is I am manifest. My consciousness in this moment in time is manifest. There is no future in that. It is now, it is who I am. That's what ehozin means. And so in that, in the creation of who I am, leaving the, I still do entrepreneur stuff. I still have a contract with various tribes. I still do film production. I still work in the architecture industry. I help landowners develop their land to create wellness centers. In addition to that, I'm also a life coach. I've been doing that since 2015. And that has been motivated by my grandmother, who has always put us in a position of doing ceremonies. For those of us who grew up on the reservation and those of us who have that devotion to community, how we learn is to literally be placed in those opportunities, in those situations where we have to cultivate those opportunities to learn. In this case, we were placed in ceremony. There's 5 of us, me and my brothers, there's 5 of us, and we're sort of like the runts of our little community. And they always looked at us as free labor, our aunts and our uncles. Yeah, go get the interpreter boys, you know, they put them to work, go have them brand the cattle, go have them take care of the sheep. oh, we have to fill all those woods for the ceremony. Go get them. You know, they have to collect the medicine. Oh, those interpreter boys, go over there. And then my grandmother had to create community within where we're from. So you have roughly 60 square miles of rural country. And you have about maybe 15 to 20 families that occupy anywhere from 4 square miles to 6 square miles. So when a family down the road is having a ceremony, we all have to help each other out because it's so rural. And so that was one way she developed good relations with people down the road. She would grab us and say, okay, I'm gonna drop you off to that family over there. You're gonna stay there for 3 weeks and you're gonna help them out. And so that's how she created relationships within the community, is through us. But while we were there, that family took care of us. And they taught us how to sing the songs, how to go get the herbs, how to cut the wood a certain way, how to take care of the sheep, how to take care of the cattle. And then they would say, okay, we come back, and then they say, okay, that family over there wants help. And then she would take us over there. So that's how we grew up. So we are in the practice of our spiritual identity. And that's what Eho Zen is about. Eho Zen is a practice of self. How we understand ourselves, how we define ourselves. Spiritual awakening, spiritual awareness isn't something that we come to. It's something that we practice. It's an everyday thing. So that's how we were grown. That's how we grew up. So I did that for a number of years, and as a life coach, the closest modality, the closest behavior health, evidence-based certification program that I thought met that is the Integral Theory, which is out of California with Ken Wilber's teaching. And so I spent 3 years looking at that process, looking at behavior health, looking at that particular piece, and I became a life coach in 2015 using that process. And then right around that same time, I started offering plant medicines to my clientele. A lot of the clientele that I work with at the time and even now are people who are in executive positions. I have a couple of people who work for Tesla. I have a lot of motivational speakers, professional athletes that I work with. So for me, growing up, the practice of self was always putting myself in positions of opportunity. And so for me, it comes out in different ways. One of those particular ways that was really helpful for me was being a college athlete, being an athlete. Putting myself in a position where I would reach the pinnacle of my existence in order to demonstrate a proficiency of how I can meet that moment and meet that challenge. And so that is a practice of self. And so I bring that into my life coaching and into how I work with my clientele. And a year ago, because of the psychedelic renaissance that has been happening over the recent decade or so all over the country, I felt like it was necessary for us as a Indigenous leader, a person who has a lineage connection, a person who has the understanding of these medicines, to be in that position of opportunity. For me, being in a position of opportunity with the psychedelic renaissance is really reinforcing protocol, accountability, and how medicine is being offered and how medicine is being cultivated. And so we created the church, which is now called Ayahuasca Sacrament. And underneath that church, we have 4 medicines that we offer. It's in Colombia, it's called Yaqui. The ayahuasca in Colombia is called Yaqui. And the person who serves that is directly connected to the Taitas, Taita, Benito, Leo, and all those folks. And then we do the Peyote medicine, which is, I'm associated with that, and I'm directly connected to a tribe in a village, the Huachuma in Mexico, where the medicine comes from. And then we have the psilocybin, which is the mushrooms, and then we also have the Huachuma. So those are the 4 medicines that we offer through the church. And what makes us unique underneath the church is we have a direct lineage connection. We actually practice the dietas within that culture, within that tradition. We go down there, we participate in the community. They recognize us as brothers and sisters. We recognize them as family. So each of us who are servers underneath the church, we are not only personally devoted to this, but we see it as an everyday practice. So in a nutshell, that's what I do. That's who I am. In medicine communities, Uncle Ron comes from the Navajo teaching and philosophy. When we're growing up, we're always given to our aunties and our uncles because they're the ones who teach us. It's the parents' responsibilities, the mothers and the fathers, to take care of the physical well-being or the well-being of the child, but it's the aunties and the uncles who are the ones who teach, the ones who take the child and teach them the songs, teach them the prayers, teach them all those things. And I'll finish with this, and then we can have sisters start hammering me with the questions. So all of you are my relatives. You're my in-laws through my son. My children on their mom's side are English, Irish, Scottish. And so in Navajo teaching, the man is married into the women's family. And everything that he does for the family belongs to the family. He doesn't own anything. And so being that my kids' mothers are English, Irish, that's who they are on their mom's side, you're my in-laws. So therefore, out of that context, I am obligated to humanity. I'm obligated to humanity to be in a position of teaching, to be in a position of sharing, to be in a position of offering. It is my responsibility in the context of Navajo tradition that I'm obligated to bring a lot of the stuff that we're talking about forward and nurture that relationship with humanity. Just don't come at me at payday, because I don't have that much. Don't ask for money. But that's a little bit about who I am.
Yeah, thank you so much. Everything you've shared definitely has brought up some questions that I would like to kind of dive in just a little bit more deeply. You mentioned 4 different medicines specifically. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Yaqui, the lineage, and a little bit more about what dieta means in that context, and then each context of the 4 various medicines, and the same with your connection with the Peyote and that tradition. I'd like you to also share a little bit more about that Indigenous connection as well, and what that means to apprentice or to learn how to receive the medicine before even administering it or becoming a practitioner. So if you could break those down a little bit more, I'm very curious.
So in Navajo traditions, I'm referring to I'm referring to the Navajo tradition a lot because that's where I grew up. So in that context, that's how I relate to the world, and that's how I understand how I have to exist in the world, is through these traditions. But in that, I'm also related to the San Carlos Apache tribe on my mom's side, and I'm also related on my mom's side to the Yaqui community, which is down in Mexico. Not too long ago, I found out that through my mom that I'm actually Mexican, through the Yaqui traditions. And so that has been really a big eye-opener that actually connected me to the Peyote medicine down in Mexico. That happened like back in like when I was 45. So in all of these contexts that I'm familiar with, all of these 4 medicines that we talked about, in that context, there's an understanding of how we see the medicine. In Navajo traditions, the understanding of medicine is what we call azeh, which is your mouth, azeh. Medicine, not in the context that we're bringing something into our bodies to be able to heal ourselves, that we're looking outside of ourselves. Azeh means there's a meeting in the middle. There's a meeting in this space, azeh. So it could be your voice, it could be a communication, it could be anything. But there's a meeting, and in the meeting, it's looking at 2 intelligence coming together. There's 2 intelligence coming together. There's you as a human being in all of these levels of consciousness, and all these levels of awareness of how you understand yourself. And then there's the universe, however the universe shows up for you. There's a meeting of intelligence coming together, azeh. So being that the medicine is part of the universe, you're meeting the medicine, you're meeting the intelligence two intelligence beings coming together in this moment in time. So that's what it means, is it? And so in that context, when you look at the Yaqui traditions, which is in Colombia, that's the Colombian version of Ayahuasca, you have the Taitas who talk about two intelligence in terms of four visions, or four visions that the plant comes from, or their four intelligence of its existence, and how they come to us. So when we ingest the medicine, there's four visions or four intelligences that come into our body, which then create that relationship, those different hierarchy in terms of consciousness or that psychedelic experience. And so they have, the way that they look at it is from the different manifestations of, say, the serpent, the jaguar, and all of those elements. That's how those intelligence come to meet you. And so we work directly with the Taitas. One of my dear friend, Shams Tay, is the person who's apprenticed with the Taitas for over 15 years. And he goes down and he works with them on a regular basis. A dieta, or a diet, is when we spend our own personal time with the in that case, a Taita, or a shaman, or a spiritual leader, and they direct us over a period of time of either 30 days or a week or whatever it is, and we diet the medicine. Diet isn't just ingesting it, it's the songs that come along with it. It's the community that you're being held in within that process. It's going out and harvesting the medicine. So we spend that time in a dieta to diet what is happening for our better good. And they guide us through that process. In the Huachols or the Wicarita traditions, they do the same thing. Their idea of diet is there's a beginning of the season where they harvest the medicine, and then there's the end of the season where they close the medicine. So within that time period, you are dieting the medicine. In other words, you're going out, you're saying your prayers to collect the peyote, and then you bring that back, and then you go through these different ceremonies as a community, and then you close everything off. So a dieta doesn't mean just dieting, like nutrition, like you're putting something in your mouth. It's actually having a consciousness and a practice around these medicines so that you have a mindfulness experience. The Huachuma comes from the Andes, which comes from the Taitas. We connect with them through that way. And then the other medicine that we do is psilocybin. Psilocybin comes mostly from the Mexican traditions. There is a culture, there is a ceremonial process that does allow for that medicine to be put in the context of prayer, song, and community. So that's out of Mexico that we dive into with those medicines. Everything that we do in terms of the medicine is a ceremonial process. Only because there's a level of intelligence that has been played over centuries in which humanity met this intelligence and learned how to work with these medicines. So this is century-old practice. This isn't just something that Ron Interpreter did 4 ayahuasca ceremonies in a row, and here I am, right? This is centuries of individuals who have mastered the intelligence of these medicines, and then are working with you over an extended period of time, years, to be able to teach you and master what that medicine is. And then as a result, you then become a server or a ceremonialist within those traditions. Yeah.
You bring up a term, ceremonial practices. I think it's used in a very broad context, especially in this community when people say ceremony. And for me as a Navajo woman, growing up in ceremony is different than the context of me running with the tribe that I was first working with a couple years ago. And their type of ceremony was really loud, electronic music and 30 people on a mat, and that was ceremony for them. And I'm like, this is not ceremony. So could you tell us a little bit more about what ceremonial practices means to you, especially as an Indigenous practitioner?
Yeah. The closest term that I can understand ceremony in Western traditions and Western philosophy is it's a collective consciousness. We hear that a lot in a lot of these different ceremonies with our English and Irish brothers and sisters. It's like this collective consciousness. We're coming together and we're creating a sense of consciousness around this particular moment. And so, in Navajo traditions and philosophy, there are 12 levels of consciousness. Everywhere from basic, like this is a hardwood floor, basic deduction. 1 + 1 is equal to 2. Very rational process. So that's one level of consciousness. But there's 12 levels of that. Another way to look at it is if you take 1 + 1 is equal to 11. Who understands that concept? Raise your hand. You take 1 and you take 1, you get 11. Right? So there's a consciousness associated with that, to be able to see that perspective. The closest thing that comes to articulate that would be the different levels of sleeping patterns. So there's like 5 levels of sleeping, correct? Like beta, theta, something like that. There's 5 levels in terms of the brainwave, in terms of how you sleep, that are measured. Well, in those 5, if you look at the last 3, they're broken down into 3 more, which makes 12. So everything from basic as wood, this hardwood floor, to literally an ascension of leaving your body, which is the highest form of existence and consciousness. And so when we think of ceremony, that's what we're doing. We're opening ourselves to an experience where we're cultivating different levels of consciousness in terms of how we interact with the universe, and that's what ceremony is. So ceremony is allowing yourself to be in a container, that's another word that we use, or within a group. And so everyone there is devoted to that experience. Everyone's devoted to that experience, meaning that they're putting their mind and their heart into this experience. The other idea about ceremony is that there's certain songs we sing. Songs have, the closest that we talk about is sound baths. There's certain existence in terms of how frequency affect the body, right? So those frequency are associated with the intelligence of the plants. So the plants have a certain frequency. So when we sing these songs, we are not necessarily activating the plants, but we're talking to the plants. Western philosophy and traditions of medical health is that I got to activate this water. I got to activate this plant, meaning it's coming from me in order to look at this thing, and it's somehow dead or not alive, so therefore I have to activate it. They already live. They're already existing. We're just aligning to that experience, which is a higher level of consciousness. So that's something that we have to take in consideration in ceremony. The other thing is the universe has a way of operating. The universe just has a way of existing. And how we understand that is universal law. Law of polarity, right? That's one law. Law of reciprocity. There's all these 12 laws that exist out there that we use in terms of physics, dynamics, structure, all these things. We have that understanding that that's how the universe works. So in ceremony, we're able to have a structure or a foundation that we can relate to these things. Keep in mind that they have an intelligence, they have a way to work with us. So we have to find that conscious level of how we're going to speak to them, how we're going to interact with them. So there's structure. So ceremony is about structure too. Allows us to give a sense of foundation. Another terminology out there is that I'm grounded. Let's ground in this moment, right? So that means that we're at a conscious level getting ourselves associated with how the universe works so that we can then ascend. So that's the idea. So ceremony is a combination of all of those things happening simultaneously in the moment. And it takes an individual to understand how you can navigate in those different levels of consciousness. Because when you bring the medicine in, when you meet that intelligence is going to activate what's already inside of you in terms of the chemical and the pharmaceutical elements that are in your body. All it does is it accelerates it 100 times quicker. So if there's an acceleration, you have to have a structure so that when you accelerate, you don't get lost in that experience. So that's kind of how I understand it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think another thing that was coming up for me too was kind of the training component, and really, man, we're talking about indigenous cultures and learning how to work with these medicines, dietas, and what real apprenticeship looks like when working with these medicines versus modern day, these new clinical practices that are coming forward, what does it look like, these indigenous practices now with modernity and these more clinical settings that maybe there is no song that's happening, right? Maybe the medicine is also being formulated in a lab. What's the difference in how it's being harvested, prepared, handled, in these indigenous ways versus more modernized ways? So I'm curious, like, where are we standing in that too, especially as indigenous practitioners straddling kind of both of these worlds?
Yeah, I think what you're going to find in most Native traditions, at least it has been my experience and the way that I understand it, is all of us come from an indigenous background. In other words, every one of us, at some level, at some point, our ancestors touched this ground. Our ancestors put our hands up to the sky. We all come from a indigenous tradition. However, over time, because of different human experiences and over time and over centuries, a lot of us have moved away from these practices. A lot of us come from the European cultures and European countries where we no longer have that connection. And over time, we end up here. It is happening right now in Native community too as well. We have a lot of Native Americans who are federally recognized tribes who do have a distinct culture and a tradition, and they're experiencing that too as well. Because of modernization and the elements of convenience. I love my Starbucks. You know, I gotta have it, right? So when I go back home, Grandma puts coffee on the stove, and I'm looking at that, going, man, you know, tall blonde with cream. Yeah. So I understand that, but the idea is that when it comes to apprenticeship, it's the proficiency of self. I go back to being an athlete. I'm not going to have somebody run the 400 for me. I'm not going to have somebody swim that for me. The idea is I need to be in the practice of this. It is my integrity, it's my obligation to be able to be in the manifestation of who I am. It's a devotion, it's a discipline. And so that's what these protocols are all about. It's a discipline. It's not so much that you're honoring somebody else. Yes, that is part of the experience, but most ultimately you're honoring yourself. If you're going to do a physical fitness program, if you're going to do Wim Hof, those of you who love Wim Hof, you know, right here, it's a discipline of honoring you as a person. It's honoring the spiritual nature of who you are and creating a human experience that will elevate your sense of intelligence. That's what this is about. So you can lend that to somebody to do it, or if I'm going to learn how to do a medicine just after 4 ceremonies, that's my level of proficiency. That's my level of devotion to myself. Versus if I'm going to be in it for years before I'm actually sitting down and then serving the medicine. So that's one way to look at it. Again, it's between you and God. It's between you and the Creator. Ehozin, how you know yourself. It's really up to you. In terms of obligation to humanity, I'm definitely not going to go to a surgeon who just got out of college and got his license or her license to be a surgeon. I was definitely not going to do that. I'm going to look for somebody who has an extended experience being a heart surgeon if I'm going to work on my heart. I'm going to take the time to look for somebody who took the time to understand what it is that they're doing. Okay? I'm not just going to go for whoever's there. So there is a humanity obligation of exchange there. One is I'm recognizing the proficiency and the ability of that individual's capability and capacity to give me what I need. That's one transaction. So I'm honoring that person in that process. There's a devotion, there's a communicable devotion that I have for that person in recognizing their ability. And vice versa, they're also recognizing themselves by being obligated or somehow saying yes to my experience in that term of care. So it's really important to be able to have practitioners who have a continued devotion and practice with these traditional ways. 100%. It's really, really important. We as Navajo people, we as Indigenous people say, the medicine called me, here I am. You know what? The medicine told me that I don't have to work with it anymore. There's no context. We just don't understand that. It's a devotion, it's a life practice. In Navajo tradition and philosophy, the goal in life is to be your own practitioner. From the time that you're born and the time that you become an adult, people are going to come into your life. Ron, this is how this looks like. This is how you sing that song. This is how you collect that. This is how you pray. This is that song you want to sing. This is that particular medicine. They're teaching you, but at some point in time, I'm going to be responsible for myself. And so my destiny in life is to be my own practitioner, to be my own healer. So I'm going to do the best that I can in order for me to understand my full well-being so that I don't have to rely on anyone else to be able to be in that space. Ultimately, that's my goal. And we usually don't reach that until we're like probably 80 or something. I was telling Sister here, don't call me an elder. I'm not there. But that context is really important. We meet the medicine, right? We meet the intelligence. If we're going to meet the intelligence 2 years from now and stay in that space and cultivate that relationship, then that's where we're at. But if we meet the medicine 10 years from now, we both meet that medicine there for that duration of time, that's the level of proficiency and capacity that I'm able to exist within the context of the universe. That's what that means.
Thank you so much. I definitely have more questions, especially around ethics and things like that, but that's more of my jam maybe. I want to open it up to the floor and take the opportunities to hear from the community. What do you feel like is important and worth asking about? Please chime in.
So I have a question about like what's the barrier of entry for, say, I want to come to a ceremony, right? I feel like what's missing in the psychedelic community is more ceremonial stuff, more practices where there's a long history of traditional ways of doing things that people can learn from, and also have community around, afterwards to have what we're having right now, which is that shared consciousness like you talked about. So what's the barrier of entry for me to come to one of your ceremonies, or anybody here to come to one of your ceremonies and have that community involved?
The barriers are really up to the teacher, right? So if Ron Interpreter is going to learn from a particular practitioner, then he's going to follow those protocols as it is determined by that teacher, right? I know that culture appropriation is a big thing out there.
Yeah.
That's one way that one of the ways that it does come out. And the other is one of the hardest things that we can take from practitioner is, no, you're not ready yet. That's a very hard thing to hear. My understanding about that, because I've had that so many times said to me, like no, 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 no. And how I dealt with it is that there's an opportunity here for me to, there's an opportunity for me to hear, to understand the trueness of who I am and what it is that I want to do and what is it that I want to offer. So the barriers could be by the teacher, by the lineage, by what is being taught by that individual. That could be one barrier. Another barrier is just because of the psychedelic renaissance that are happening now. You have so many churches, you have so many people pouring medicine all over the place. For us, I wouldn't say a barrier, but a criteria for our church is to go through a venting process. We sit, we talk to that person, what is it that you're looking for, what's your health like, what is the medication you're doing. So there's an entry process of how we vent that person. And quite honestly, a lot of the times when we're done with them, we answer their solutions. They don't really have to sit with the medicine. A lot of that is taken care of up front. But in the event that they want to come, we let them know if they say, if we let them know if they're able to come or not. That venting process is also to say, you know what, I think that community over there is much better for you than it is here, right? So a lot of that goes into Western practices. When you think about Western practices of medicine, there's that oath that doctors and people in the medical field make.
Hippocratic oath.
Yes. So in that context of making that oath, I am going to fulfill what is required of me in order for me to perform what is best within my capability for me to perform. And that's the same scenario. Sometimes you go to a doctor, they say, no, I'm not the right person, I'll send you over here. Or you may want to be a part of this particular thing that's going on, nope, you're not there. This clinical trial, nope, you're over here. So every medicine, every access to medicine is going to have limitations or barriers as to how we access it. I just encourage you just to keep looking, keep finding. In our native traditions, medicine will always find you. Medicine will always find you. Sometimes we're not ready there for it. There's sometimes where we're trying to feed a need. I gotta have this, there's a need. Versus adding a quality of life to your experience. The medicine will show up in the way that it needs to for you. If you're actually going after something that is a need, the majority of the time you're going to probably be turned away. Because the need that you have to fulfill is mostly within yourself, in the spiritual context of what we're talking about. When you want to enhance your quality of life, that's a whole different heart-opening experience that you're wanting to allow to bring into your life. They're two different scenarios. So if you go with the mentality or the psychology, like I want to bring a quality of life into my experience, what that means is that I'm open to whatever is going to be asked of me. If I got to stop drinking Starbucks coffee, I'm open to that to increase my quality of life. Right? So you're open to whatever's going to come to you, whatever's going to be required of you. And sometimes you're so focused on the need, nope, I'm going to take my Starbucks into that medicine ceremony, I'm going to have that medicine ceremony, right, with my cup of coffee. See, I'm so focused on that as being a need that I'm not really being open to the experience. I'm closing myself to that experience. So that's another way. So a lot of these ceremonialists will look for those pieces. When you're on the right path, when somebody is asking you these questions or has a venting process at the beginning, you're on the right road. You are on the right road. If somebody says, nope, come on in, red flags. Red flags. Because as practitioners, we have that Hippocratic oath from a cultural standpoint, just as a lot of these medical professionals do.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, I have a question. So I really appreciate what you're sharing. First of all, thank you. Thanks for being here. As someone growing up in the modern Western world, I think it's can be challenging sometimes in the context of these ceremonies and these medicines to bridge the gap, right? To say, like, you shared some of the songs or something like that, and that I'm sure has some cultural context for you and how you grew up. I grew up very differently, right? So I'm not going to have that same resonance, or something might make sense within the framework of the work that you do because there's a tribal nature to it, right? Where people have lived in a certain way, very, very communally, right? Now we live hyper individualized, right? I have 8-foot block walls separating me from all my neighbors, right? Yeah. So very different approach there. Curious what your thoughts are just around that in general. Any issues you've seen that have come up with that, how you've handled it, that kind of, just kind of bridging that, like, okay, this works in the context of an indigenous sort of framework, but a lot of us don't live in that anymore. So, like, how do we navigate that, or what have you done that's been successful in that realm, if that's clear?
Well, my own personal practice is to get out of nature, just to get out of that block, get out of that space, to manifest, right? To be in that space that we think that we need to be or that we have to be in. I think is really important to understand. Another form of what we're talking about is intuition. There is a place within ourselves where we're saying, this isn't right for me. Like, I'm living in this house, it's just not right for me, right? This context of the four walls. Or the context of, I am in this relationship, there's a sense of a four wall. Or I'm in the context of this job, right? So we need to be able to tap into that inner part of ourselves, our intuition, to be able to then manifest from that space or get present in that area so that we can then act on what is necessary for us to cultivate or manifest an environment that will be nurturing to us. And sometimes that may be going out simply, like I'm in the house all the time, oh my gosh, let's go outside, right? Sometimes it may be, you know, that person over there or that community over there, something's going on, I'm gonna go over and be a part of that, right? Things of that nature. So allowing ourselves to speak to our intuition, our mindfulness, is to become present with ourselves and listen to that. That's the intelligence that's within us. That's within us that is speaking very soundly and very fundamentally to our existence. And we gotta be able to listen to that. And once we listen to that, then we can step into how we can cultivate that and create that with our others or just with ourselves. Yeah.
I feel like a part of what the description of ceremony is for me is also these acts of rituals, practices that we institutionalize this structure. And we can all do that in our own daily practices. And that's what I like. I was kind of having a conversation earlier about creating more discipline in my life and deepening my work with my own medicine. I can, and it's exactly what Ron's talking about. I can only meet the medicine and my community as much as I have done the work myself. But yes, ritual I think is another great way to ground into creating those more intentional spaces and places throughout the day and in our own lives from an Indigenous perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, rituals that's another way to look at it, rituals. Creating rituals in our lives to be able to see the day through, that kind of a thing. One of the things that I really want to reinforce when it comes to a lot of the Western applications is there's a need and a want versus an intuitive response. I think we have to be very mindful of that. In the clientele that I'm working with, in the life coaching that I'm doing, a lot of folks are going from this place of want, which is a very self-serving, very victimized, very trauma-based, which is okay, is to be aware of that, but how somehow reframe that, and there's all kinds of techniques out there, but just coming from that place of need, and then reframing it to where you can actually come from a place of manifesting into something that creates a sense of quality of life, which is to really understand your intuition, just really listen to that intuition. That is a ritual in itself. A lot of us don't come from those traditions. A lot of us don't come from, like Ron Interpreter grew up in Navajo, so there's a certain way that we welcome the day. There's a certain thing that we do. There's a certain song we have to say. There's a certain way that we phonetically create that moment. Then when we close the day, we do the same thing. A lot of us don't come from that tradition. No, we didn't have a lot of aunties and uncles. But there's so many aunties and uncles out there. In Western terminologies, you have a lot of modalities out there. You have a lot of practitioners out there. The best thing that you can do is take the effort. Start somewhere. You got to start somewhere. That's the only way that you're going to be able to cultivate a ritual practice. Start somewhere. You may not have an auntie or an uncle. You may not know your Irish traditions, or you may not know the Celtic traditions of all of these things that are out there, but at least begin somewhere to tap into that intuitive part. Yeah.
Anybody else? Any other questions?
I have a question. Thank you. I really enjoyed your talk. Can you talk about sustainability and peyote?
Sustainability and peyote. Oh man.
Ouch.
One of the things that that I've experienced with the lineages of peyote is I grew up on Navajo Nation, so I grew up in the traditions of what we call the Native American church. Grandma says, all right, your uncle needs to put that teepee up, go help him, right? So we're like 10 years old, trying to put that teepee up, you know? And then my uncle says, we need like a whole truckload of wood, go find it, go clean it up. So we're doing, so we were in the practice of NAC, Native American Church. So in my context, probably till I was about maybe 24 1904, something around there. My understanding of Native American church was Navajos. Navajos just coming together, sitting with the medicine in a teepee, singing these songs. That was it. When I went to college, someone said, one of my dear friends said, we're going to go to a Native American church meeting. I was in Tucson at the time. And he says, we're going to a Native American church. And I was in college. I'd been away from home for a good 3 years. And I said, man, there's a bunch of Navajos down here. There's somewhere to have a teepee somewhere. Yeah, let's go. Right? Let's go find out. So I'm looking, and we come to this one community, which is the Dona O'odham community in South Tucson. And I walk in, and they're all Dona O'odham tribal members. I'm like, okay, this is different. And then as they were singing their songs, they were singing in their culture and their traditions. I'm like, wow, there's more to Native American church. I was like, wow. And then the following year, we found out that there was another Native American church, and I said, okay, let's go over there. So knowing that it was with that tribe, I said, I'm expecting Dona O'odham. I go in there, and there's a couple of white guys sitting in there, so to speak. Forgive me for that. And I'm like, wow, this is different. And then the rattle goes around, and they're singing their songs, and then it comes to my Irish brother over here, and he's really singing that song, that Native American church song. I'm like, wow, I'm like blown away. Like this is insane. This is crazy. So for me, it got me really thinking, what is this medicine really about? Where did it come from? And so that's when I started realizing that the peyote medicine has a history, has a lineage, it has a place where it's coming from. And in my discovery, it comes from Mexico, which is the Huirarica community down in Mexico. They are the original caretakers of medicine. And then that medicine, in its way, is understood as a female medicine. It's feminine. In their culture, in their community, they call it grandmother. And over the centuries, North America, meaning Canada and the United States, these tribes up here had an exchange. And the medicine made its way up here. And here in the United States, the tribes, the Comanches, the Sioux, all of these tribes up here are known as horse culture or warrior society cultures. And so they took the medicine and changed the identity of it being grandfather. It became a masculine element because of the culture and traditions that they are connected with. And then in the early 70s, late 70s, through Congressional Act, it became a Native American Church Freedom Right Act, which enacted the right of a human being, a right of a citizen to be able to practice this. So the medicine went through three identities. It went from its original way of being, in terms of the caretakers, coming back up to here being a culture, which is a grandfather identity, and then now, Ron Interpreter, as a Native American, I have the right as a citizen of the United States to practice this. So it went through three identity shifts. The medicine is still a medicine. It hasn't changed its identity. And so a lot can be shared around that in the understanding that the medicine will change in the way that it needs to accommodate us. So if you want to talk about preservation, the medicine will accommodate humanity in the way that it needs to in order to find its healing. Okay? Medicine doesn't create the protocols. Medicine doesn't create the legislation or the regulations of how it needs to be used. It's the human experience that creates those limitations and creates those barriers as to how we have access to the medicine. So preservation is more of a human nature and a human responsibility than it is the medicine. So I think that's a huge conscious and awareness that we have to understand, that the medicine has a way of cultivating relationships in the way that is necessary for us to become together as a collective consciousness that will allow for preservation to happen. That's what we don't see. That's what we don't understand. In the Native American church, when it came up here, There's a gentleman by the name of Quanah Parker who established the Native American Church. Under the Constitution of the United States, we all know that there's two entities, businesses. You either are for-profit or a non-profit. That's how we establish ourselves in the United States. So, as a non-profit or as a religious entity, Quanah Parker says we're going to set up the Native American Church to operate as a business from a belief or from a religious aspect. The Native American Church is based on his mother's side and his dad's side. His dad's side is Comanche, all the Comanche musics, the medicines, the philosophy, the indigenous perspective of the medicine came in. We as Native Americans, we adore that, we honor that. That's where we get the right to be able to practice it because it's for Native Americans. What we Native Americans don't understand is his mom's side was English.
Yep.
She was a Christian. He brought the Christian concept and the philosophy into the Native American Church. So again, meeting the intelligence and a place of consciousness. My understanding is that Quanah Parker saw an opportunity where the intelligence of humanity could come together and find a cohesiveness in its existence. But over time, as a right of a Native American under the citizen, this is mine. So, preservation. The preservation is really about where do I want to meet the medicine and what am I going to be devoted and disciplined in order to be able to maintain that existence. What level of consciousness am I going to meet the universe? That's where preservation comes. The people who own the medicine, the people who are stewards of the medicine, where they come from, their consciousness of the medicine is up here. It's for humanity that we recognize. At least that's my understanding.
I
Yeah.
wish I would have recorded that. That was an easy answer.
Yeah.
Alright.
Follow-up question to that, though, like more specifically, because there is a lot of movement happening locally in the U.S. anyways for legalization and decriminalization. What's your
Yep.
personal take on leaving peyote in that, or taking, kind of setting it aside as its own thing? More so decrim, less legalization, more decrim is what I'm personally curious about.
Yeah. Well, obviously, my personal opinion is that I gotta see where the medicine is. My personal opinion is, where do I want to meet the medicine? Where am I choosing to be there? Obviously, when I was growing up, it was here, Navajo only. But as I grew up and I started getting myself more open to where the medicine comes from, I would like to meet the medicine in this space in terms of watching humanity heal. And that, as a result of that, I created a church where we offer the medicine to not only just Native Americans, but to non-natives. And as a result of that, we are seeing huge changes, a huge shift in consciousness. When I go to a church, when I go to a Catholic church, the honest that I feel, knowing that that's where the lineage and the ancestors come from, is amazing. I'm privileged to be in that space where over centuries there's a cultivation of this ancestral teaching of this church. When non-natives come to the peyote medicine, they experience the same thing. And that's what we're looking for. I want to understand that lineage, and I want to understand that ancestral teaching not from a rational place of being or from a citizenship. I want to be in an intelligent communication with this medicine. And therefore, I'm going to be more obligated, more devoted to where the medicine comes from, and I will then cultivate a relationship and a preservation context or a practice around it. And I think that's what the medicine is about. For me, I think it's about creating these experiences where individuals have a deeper reverence and a deeper appreciation for because they're going through a healing practice and a healing process. In terms of a human right, it creates a sense of scarcity. It's a scarcity mentality. This is ours and ours only. There's a lack of it, so therefore I'm going to have the right to be able to maintain that, and I'm going to initiate that. So my personal opinion is I like to meet the medicine up here. But the beautiful thing about it is it's creating and it's cultivating how humanity is actually starting to relate to one another. The access or the lack of access to a lot of these plant medicine is creating humanity's awareness that there's something here that we all need to see each other at and get beyond the limitations that we hold for ourselves or the rights that we held for ourselves and really look at us in the capacity of humanity. So there's a huge shift in consciousness in humanity, the way I understand it. You had a lot of the Taoisms. I guess when it first started, it was the Christianity, it was Christ consciousness. A lot of Christ consciousness happening. You got to be saved. Let's use the word of God to go out and conquer. There was a lot of that centuries ago that translated into more of the Taoism, the yoga, all those things happening in terms of balance, hierarchy of things. And now you're having more of the indigenous tribes coming over, offering their medicine as humanity is making this huge conscious shift. So therefore everybody wants an ayahuasca experience. Humanity is looking for them to touch the ground. Humanity right now is so disconnected from each other that they need to relate to themselves. I need to go outside. I need to touch the earth. I need to go outside. I need to see the sun. I need to go outside and do all these things. Because of our social practices and because of our everyday practices, humanity is making this conscious shift. And so Native Americans or indigenous people are the keepers of these medicines. They are the keepers of these elementals. So therefore, it is our duty in relationship to humanity to be able to cultivate this process within the hierarchy, within the culture, within the protocols that are necessary. So some of us understand that. Some of us see it from that perspective. I like to meet the medicine there. That's where I cultivate my connection. One of the things that I've been able to privilege to have in terms of offering the medicine is our church is working with combat vets. In our church, we have a direct relationship where in the military you have these elite special ops forces. Where the military, there's different branches of the military, and these militaries then get the elite of the elite within their branches and they create a special ops. We work directly with those special ops in their transition out of their military duties and going back into civilian life. We use these medicines as a protocol to allow them to relieve those traumas. It's a year-long commitment, so we work with them. What I would like to see is what Quanah Parker saw. Quanah Parker saw the medicine in that there's these two consciousnesses and philosophies meeting each other where they can cultivate a collective understanding of each other. At one point in time, the Navajo language was used to save the United States through the code talkers. We used our sacred language as a way to go to combat, to kill people. Prior to that, it was the United States in the time of immigration coming in to kill off the Native Americans in order to settle on this land. I think it's about time that the warriors from each side come together under the medicine to help each other heal. That's what I see. That's where I want to be. I want to see combat veterans coming together. I want to see Native American warriors coming together under the medicine. These folks singing their songs, singing their way of life, and meeting each other in that space so that we can create a sense of healing. That's where we need to be.
I think on that note, I want to just call in and honor two particular prophecies, because what I specifically hear you speaking to is one Hopi prophecy of the brown brother and the light-skinned brother. Are you familiar with that prophecy? And what I hear you speaking to is bringing our white brothers and our brown brothers together, because the white brother went out to the east to intellectualize and analyze and build, and the brown brother stayed on the land, earth-based practices, staying connected to Mother Earth. And now within that prophecy, it's about bringing the brown brother and the white brother together, the mind and the heart back together. For me, is the interpretation of that Hopi prophecy that was actually gifted to me in a dream when I was 13. The second that I hear you referring to is also the eagle and the condor prophecy as well. The indigenous people of the South and the North working together to help shift and reawaken humanity and our consciousness and elevating our spiritual lives, our spiritual essences, and really understanding who we really are as sentient beings. So I want to close on that note with those two particular prophecies and honoring them tonight, and these ancient traditions that Ron and I are so blessed and honored to be able to be a part of the eagle and the condor prophecy. Definitely feel honored and so privileged to sit next to my brother here. And thank you so much for coming tonight, Ron, and sharing your wisdom and your expertise with us. So I'm going to let Ron close with a prayer. Please stick around. I'm sure maybe some of you have some more questions for Ron. But before you leave, after Ron's prayer, Troy's going to come up and just kind of close out the social aspect of this and some of our announcements. So please hold tight, and I appreciate everyone's presence this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So in closing, I'm always asked in ceremonial circles when we close a circle, they say, why do you really want to do this? You know, what's the point? For me, what's really important for me, and the place where I feel that beyond purpose, beyond mission, beyond confirmation, is the understanding that I love to witness humanity heal. Those of us who are practitioners, counselors, therapists, there's a moment where that person is just struggling. You can see it. And then just as an instant, they shift. And that's what I look for. And in their experience, the one thing that I really appreciate the most is that I see God looking at me through their eyes. And that's what I see. That's my experience. And I think we need to look at each other in that context when we're able to see and feel those multiple moments and cultivate those moments. They see the divinity in each other and know that we are part of that experience and we share that experience. So that's what I do. That's why I do it. That's my personal takeaway. That's the only reason why I do it. To be seen in that space, to know that God is looking back at me in that context. Just a little bit of announcement. March 19th is the equinox. We're hosting a Huachuma ceremony up in Sedona. Our church is hosting a ceremony, so if you would like to attend, feel free to get a hold of me, and then we can talk more about that. And so feel free to get a hold of me. I want to acknowledge my son, who's here. He told me one time that he wants to help people. And it's good to know that there's someone behind who has an interest. And because my dad wasn't there for me to do that. And I'm glad he's taken an interest. And that's another thing that we need to look about is generational. What we do, how we hold ourselves, and how we live this beautiful life on this earth is an opportunity for the next generation to show up. How we pray the next generation into existence is how we show up for ourselves. And I appreciate that he's here to hear this. So with that, let's take a couple of deep breaths. In that second breath, just come to a natural breathing cycle. And also bring your ancestors in. Bring in people who you love. And also at this time, just bring in what has transpired at the state legislature with the passing of Bill 1570. In that we're giving practitioners the responsibility and recognizing their abilities, recognizing their professionalism, recognizing their efforts of study, giving them the opportunity to determine how medicine is going to be offered. That's what that bill is about. honoring those who've taken the time to be the stewards, who've taken the time to go and learn these ways, who've taken the time to learn these medical applications. If there's a really great way to understanding traditional practices of lineage, traditional practices of stewardship, traditional practices of apprenticeship, this is one of those opportunities that bill will reinforce. It will create the opportunities for health practitioners to show up in that space for their clients. So think of that, and that our leaders will cultivate a great opportunity for people coming together. Hojono let the internet on the flinigi, ha aten shara aten e aten to no hokos. Yadif kisaka the internet, shema asambaka, nef ayat eto, donif hojono let the internet on the flinigi. Spiritual deities in all four directions, Father Sky and Mother Earth, in this place of sanctuary, aligning our hearts with our minds, our spiritual body with our human body, finding gratitude in this existence, finding gratitude in all the resources that brought us to this moment in time, finding gratitude that our ancestors prayed us into existence, finding gratitude that we have the privilege to pray the next generation into existence. Kut alban saskes to kut ashif ayat eto doshif hojono let the internet on flinigi. Hojona hustling, hojona hustling, hojona hustling, hojona hustling. To the sky I call you Father, to the earth I call you Mother, to all life in between I call you brother and sister. Let's take one deep breath, inhale and exhale. Brothers and sisters, repeat after me. Beauty before me.
Beauty before me.
Beauty behind me.
Beauty behind me.
Beauty above and below me.
Beauty above and below me.
It has become beautiful again.
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 I am beautiful again.
I am beautiful again.
Aho, all my relations.
Oh, all my relations.
Namaste, and so it is.
Namaste, and so it is.
Beautiful.